The mountains were quiet that morning. A soft fog rested low over the trees, and the retreat center stood still like it was holding its breath. It was a place designed for peace, for reflection, for people who wanted to step away from noise and find their own thoughts again. But inside one of the wooden rooms, a tension was rising slowly, quietly, like a storm no one had expected. Keanu Reeves sat near the window, his posture calm, his hands lightly resting together. He had come here with Sandra Bullock because the two wanted a break from their busy world. They wanted a place where no one looked at them with expectations and no one judged them for their names. The retreat had only 12 people, each sitting in a circle that morning, sharing their thoughts. It was meant to be a peaceful session. People spoke about their goals, their past challenges, and their hopes for the next few days. But peace never lasts long when someone decides to test its limits. A man named Thomas, one of the participants, leaned forward and looked directly at Keanu. He had been quiet earlier, but now his voice carried a sharpness that cut through the room. He said that Keanu always appeared too calm to be real, that people like him hide something behind their silence. He hinted that maybe Keanu acted humble only because it made people like him more. He said these words softly, but the softness only made them more dangerous. The room froze. Every person suddenly held their breath. They were shocked not because someone questioned a famous person, but because the tone felt unfair and out of place. It felt like Thomas had been waiting to throw this at Keanu without warning. Keanu did not react the way anyone expected. He did not defend himself. He did not look angry. Instead, he lowered his eyes as if the words touched something deeper than the surface, something old, something private. Sandra noticed immediately. She had known Keanu for many years. She had seen him in joyful moments, in tough moments, in moments where silence said more than words. She knew his expressions, even the small ones people usually missed. And right now, she saw something others did not see. She saw hurt, not from Thomas's question, but from the memory it awakened. Sandra felt a subtle change inside herself, something protective, something steady. She watched him breathe slowly, almost like he was trying not to show the room how the moment affected him. The facilitator of the group waited, expecting Keanu to reply. The others also watched him, their bodies stiff with anticipation. Everyone wanted to see how he would handle the confrontation. They wanted to see if he would break or stand tall. But Keanu stayed silent. And in that silence, Sandra saw her moment. Before the facilitator could move on, Sandra slowly placed her hand on the armrest beside her. She did not touch Keanu, but her gesture was enough for him to know she was stepping forward. Her posture straightened, and her voice gently entered the room. She said that people who speak without knowing often misunderstand the ones who choose silence. She said that calmness is not a mask but a strength, and that humility does not need to explain itself. Her words were smooth but firm, gentle but filled with unshakable respect. The room remained completely still. She explained that she had worked with Keanu for many years, and the man she knew was real in every sense. She said he carried his kindness quietly, not for attention, but because that is who he truly was. She spoke without anger, without pride, and without the need to prove anything. Her tone alone was enough to silence every whisper. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. He looked like he had not expected anyone, especially Sandra, to stand up with such certainty. He avoided her eyes for a moment, and the room seemed to warm slowly as the tension softened. But something strange happened. Instead of looking relieved or grateful, Keanu looked even quieter, like Sandra's words had touched something deeper than the insult did. He stared at the floor for a moment longer, and then he looked up at her. There was something unspoken in his eyes, something that held years of trust, gratitude, and a feeling he rarely allowed himself to show. The facilitator finally broke the silence and asked Keanu if he wanted to respond. Everyone waited, expecting a long explanation or at least a polite clarification. But Keanu did something unexpected. He nodded slowly and said he wanted to share something, but not here, not in front of everyone. He said he would speak later, in a smaller setting. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of nervousness that made Sandra's heart tighten slightly. She had seen his confidence many times, but nervousness was rare. Why did he want privacy? What was he planning to reveal? Why did he look at her like something important was about to unfold? These questions created a new layer of suspense in the room. Even the people who had been silent before now leaned forward slightly, sensing that something unusual was coming. Thomas looked confused. He probably expected a simple back-and-forth argument, not a moment that felt like a doorway to something bigger, something personal. Sandra felt a calm realization growing inside her. Whatever Keanu wanted to reveal later, it was something meaningful, something he had carried quietly for a long time, something she was not prepared for but also ready to face. The session ended without further conflict, but the atmosphere remained thick with curiosity and hidden emotion. The mountains outside stayed quiet, almost like nature itself was waiting to see what would happen next. And as the group slowly walked out of the room, Sandra stayed close to Keanu. Not touching him, not questioning him, but simply being present in the way she always knew he needed. Because she could feel it now. The real story had just begun. The afternoon sun rested softly over the retreat center as the group separated after the tent session. The quiet paths were lined with tall pine trees, and the air smelled clean, untouched. But inside Sandra's mind, everything was turning fast. She kept thinking about the moment Keanu said he wanted to speak privately later. He had looked calm, but his eyes told a different story, a deeper one. She had known him long enough to understand that when Keanu held something inside, he did it not because he feared the world, but because he respected the weight of his own feelings. He never rushed to speak. He chose his moments carefully. But today, something had pushed him to a place even he did not expect. Sandra walked beside him in silence. They moved toward a wooden bench near the retreat garden. The wind brushed the leaves gently, and the atmosphere felt soft, almost protective. Yet she could sense something unsettled in him. Keanu sat slowly, his shoulders relaxed but his gaze distant. Sandra waited, letting the silence wrap around them naturally. She knew better than to force him to speak. The moment had to come on its own. After a long pause, he finally breathed in and said softly that he was sorry she had to defend him earlier. Sandra turned toward him quickly, surprised. She told him there was nothing to be sorry about. She said she spoke because what Thomas said felt unfair and because she saw the effect the words had on him. Keanu nodded, but it was clear something else was bothering him. He looked toward the trees and said that people often assume calmness means someone has no wounds. They assume silence means emptiness. He said that many times in his life, people had questioned his sincerity, his quiet nature, his way of seeing the world. He had learned to let it go because reacting every time would only exhaust his spirit. But sometimes, even the strongest heart can feel the echo of old hurts. Sandra listened carefully. She felt an ache deep inside because she knew he was not just referring to today. He was speaking from experiences he rarely shared. She watched the way his hands rested still on his lap, steady but with a slight tension in the fingers. She asked him calmly why he had wanted a private conversation with the facilitator and Thomas later. She told him she sensed it was something important, something he had been holding for a while. Keanu looked at her then, and it was the first time since morning that his eyes met hers fully. There was honesty there, but also something fragile. He said he wanted to reveal something he had carried for years, something even she did not know, something that explained why the words from Thomas had touched him today more than they should have. Sandra felt her chest tighten, not out of fear, but because she had never seen Keanu hesitate like this. He was always steady, always thoughtful, always gentle in his truth. But now he looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing whether to step forward or hold back. She asked him softly if he was sure he wanted to share it. She told him she would support him, no matter what it was. He nodded, but he asked her something strange. He asked her to be there when he spoke to the facilitator and Thomas. He said he needed someone he trusted completely close to him, someone who understood his silence without needing explanations. The request stunned her slightly because Keanu rarely asked for emotional support so directly. He handled storms quietly, often alone. But today he wanted her beside him. It showed how much the moment meant to him. Sandra placed one hand gently over her own chest and told him she would be there. Her voice was steady, clear, and reassuring. She added that whatever he carried, he did not have to face it alone. He let out a slow breath, as if he had been waiting to hear those words. The two sat quietly for a while, letting the air settle between them. Birds moved through the branches, and the gentle warmth of the sun softened the heaviness around them. Yet beneath the calm surface, a strong current of suspense was rising. The private meeting was scheduled for later in the evening. The facilitator wanted everyone to rest and reset before discussing such a sensitive moment. Sandra agreed, though the wait only made her mind race more. As the hours passed, Sandra found herself replaying the morning again and again. The way Keanu lowered his eyes, the way he asked for privacy, the way he looked at her afterward. She could feel that tonight would reveal a truth that would not only change the atmosphere of the retreat, but also deepen her understanding of Keanu in a way she never expected. When evening approached, the air cooled. The retreat lights glowed softly against the wooden walls of the study room where the meeting would happen. Sandra and Keanu walked toward it slowly. She kept glancing at him, noticing that his usual calmness was mixed with something more intense, almost like quiet courage. The door was open. The facilitator stood inside, waiting with a calm expression. Thomas was already there, sitting stiffly, unsure of what to expect. The room was simple, with warm lamps and shelves filled with books. It felt safe, yet the tension filled every corner. Keanu stepped in first, Sandra right behind him. Thomas shifted nervously when he saw them. He opened his mouth as if to speak, maybe to apologize again, but Keanu gently raised a hand, signaling that he wanted to speak first. The facilitator nodded, giving Keanu the space. Sandra watched him take a deep breath. She could almost feel the weight pressing on his chest, the heaviness of carrying something for so long. He reached into his jacket slowly. Her heartbeat quickened. She sensed it. The reveal was coming. But what she did not know yet was that the truth he was about to share would silence the room in a way no one expected, and it would change the way she looked at him forever. Because sometimes the deepest respect comes from the secrets someone carries quietly, hoping one day to be understood. The study room felt warmer than usual, almost too warm for a cool mountain evening. Maybe it was the tension, maybe it was the expectation, or maybe it was the weight Keanu carried as he stood there, holding something inside his jacket pocket, something he had not shown anyone in many years. Sandra stood close enough to sense the shift in his breathing. Her presence was steady, a quiet reassurance he clearly needed. The facilitator sat with calm focus, while Thomas looked tense, unsure, and deeply uncomfortable. He kept glancing at Sandra as if hoping she might soften what was coming next, but her expression was unreadable. She was here for Keanu, nothing else. Keanu finally pulled out a small notebook, the same one Sandra saw earlier peeking from his jacket. It looked old, the cover softened from years of being handled. Not a letter, not a script, not anything dramatic. Just a simple notebook that somehow held the atmosphere of something far heavier. He placed it on the table gently. Thomas stared at it, confused. The facilitator leaned forward slightly. Sandra felt her pulse slow, controlled but intense. Keanu spoke softly. He said the notebook had been with him for almost half his life. Not because it held memories he wanted to admire, but because it held moments he was afraid of forgetting. He explained that the world often judged him by what they saw on camera or read in articles. But inside this notebook were the truths he never spoke out loud. Sandra watched the way his hands rested against the table. They were steady, but she could see the slight tension in his fingers, the kind that only appeared when he was revealing something deeply personal. Keanu said the reason Thomas's comment affected him earlier was not because the words were harsh. Harsh words he could handle, but because the accusation reminded him of a chapter in his life he had never processed fully. A chapter he carried quietly, hoping time would dissolve it. But time never did. The facilitator gently asked him if he wanted to share what was inside the notebook. Keanu nodded, and then he opened it. The first page was simple, a sentence written in small, clean handwriting. Sandra could not read it from where she stood, but she could see Keanu looking at it like it held a memory too clear to ignore. He said the notebook contained his reflections on people who shaped him, both in strength and in pain. People he respected, people he struggled with, and people he learned from. Some pages held gratitude. Some held grief. Others held truths he never dared to speak because he feared they would change how others saw him. And then he said something that caught every breath in the room. He said the notebook also held the names of people who had saved him emotionally, without ever knowing they had. Sandra's heart tightened suddenly. She did not need to see the page to feel it. He turned a few pages slowly, revealing words, drawings, little fragments of thoughts he had kept hidden. Thomas watched with growing discomfort, realizing this was not a performance. This was real. painfully real. Then Keanu stopped on one page. This one he held open a little longer. He looked at Sandra, hesitating, as if asking for silent permission. She gave it with a small nod. He turned the notebook around and placed it on the table so Sandra and the others could see. Her name was written at the top. The handwriting was steady but emotional. The ink slightly faded, showing it had been written many years ago. Beneath her name, lines filled the page. Sandra read them slowly, her breath catching gently with each sentence. He had written about a time when he felt lost, not publicly, not in his career, but privately, in a way he had never explained to anyone. He wrote that she had been the only person who noticed something was wrong even when he hid it well. He wrote that she had reached out with simple kindness, a small gesture no one else saw, and that her presence had pulled him out of a darkness he did not know how to name back then. He wrote that he had never thanked her because he did not know how to. And he wrote that he kept this page to remind himself that good people still existed in the world, even when life felt heavy. Sandra's eyes softened, not with tears but with a deep, quiet understanding. She had no idea he had carried this memory all these years. Thomas sank deeper into his seat. He looked ashamed, humbled, and lost for words. Whatever he had assumed about Keanu shattered in that moment. There was no performance here, no pretending, no image building, only truth. Keanu continued speaking softly. He said that when Thomas questioned his sincerity earlier, it touched the same wound from long ago, the wound that made him question whether people believed in his kindness or doubted it. He said he was not angry. He understood that some people speak from confusion, not malice, but he wanted Thomas to understand something important. He said that silence was not emptiness, calmness was not falsehood, and humility was not weakness. The room remained still. Keanu closed the notebook gently and placed his hand over it, like sealing the truth inside again. The facilitator spoke softly, saying the moment was powerful and honest. Thomas looked down, struggling with his next words. Finally, he apologized. Not quickly, not as a formality, but deeply, responsibly. He admitted he had judged Keanu without knowing him, without even trying to understand him. Keanu accepted the apology with a gentle nod. But then something unexpected happened. Sandra spoke. Her voice was calm, but held a depth that filled the entire room. She said the notebook was not just a piece of his past. It was proof of who he truly was, someone who paid attention, someone who felt deeply, someone who remembered kindness with more devotion than most people remembered success. She looked at him with warmth and said she was honored to be written in those pages. Then she added something that made the air shift again. She said she had always known Keanu carried something heavy, but she never imagined how deeply he valued their bond, and that his respect for her only made her respect for him stronger. Keanu looked at her in a way no one else in the room could fully understand. It was gratitude mixed with relief, mixed with a kind of emotional honesty he rarely revealed. The facilitator ended the meeting gently, sensing the moment needed space to breathe. Thomas left quietly. The room became empty except for Sandra and Keanu. Sandra stepped closer and told him softly that he did not owe her anything, that sometimes people help others without knowing how deeply it lands, and that the truth he shared today was safe with her always. Keanu nodded slowly. The weight on his shoulders seemed lighter now, like he had finally released a truth he had been carrying for far too long. As they walked out into the cool night air, the stars above the retreat center shone brighter. It felt as if the sky itself had opened a quiet blessing over them. But the story was far from over, because Sandra could feel something else rising inside him, something he had not yet shared, something connected to the notebook but bigger. And part 3 had only opened the first door. The night air outside the study room felt cooler than before, carrying a soft wind that moved through the trees like a slow whisper. Sandra and Keanu walked side by side, not speaking at first. They followed the stone path that curved around the retreat center, lit gently by small lanterns placed along the way. The world felt quiet, but inside their silence something powerful was forming. The notebook moment had revealed more than just old memories. It had opened a door inside Keanu that he had kept locked for years. Sandra sensed it in his steps. He walked slower than usual, as if he was processing everything again with each breath. She did not rush him. She knew some truths take longer to settle. They reached a wooden deck overlooking the forest. The sky above was dark blue, sprinkled with stars that looked unusually bright. The deck was empty, offering privacy and a place to breathe. Keanu leaned on the railing, looking out into the trees. Sandra stood beside him, watching his face in the soft lantern light. He spoke first, but his voice was low. He said the notebook was only part of the truth, that there was more to explain, more he had avoided for years, more he feared would make Sandra see him differently. She turned her head toward him slowly, giving him full attention without pressure. She said gently that he could share whatever he wanted, and only when he felt ready. He let out a slow breath. It seemed to steady him. Keanu began telling her about the time in his life when he had written the page about her. It was years ago, during a period where everything felt heavy, confusing, and lonely. He explained that people saw him surrounded by success, friends, and opportunities, but inside he felt disconnected from the world. He doubted his worth, doubted his strength, and doubted whether anyone truly understood him. Sandra listened carefully, her heartbeat soft but steady. She had never known he went through something so deep. He had always carried himself with calm stability. She had seen sadness in him before, but never this part of his truth. He continued, saying that during that period, he feared opening up to anyone because he felt he would burden them. He felt he needed to stay calm for others, to be the steady one, to be the listener, not the speaker. But silence, even for him, had taken its toll. And then he said something that struck Sandra deeply. He said that during one of their projects long ago, she had noticed something no one else noticed. She had asked him if he was okay, not with concern forced by politeness, but with genuine understanding. She had spoken to him privately, away from cameras and noise. She had not tried to fix anything or ask too many questions. She had only said that he did not have to carry everything by himself. That simple sentence had stayed with him for years. Sandra felt a warmth rising in her chest. She remembered the moment, but she never thought it meant so much to him. It had felt natural to her, just kindness, just care. Keanu said the reason he had never spoken about it before was because he feared showing vulnerability might change how people looked at him. He feared lowering the emotional walls he had built would make him feel exposed. And over time, hiding the truth became so normal that he forgot how to let it out again. Until today, he explained that Thomas's comment brought back the exact feeling he had battled during that difficult period. The idea that his calmness was fake. The idea that people could not see his heart beyond his silence. The idea that what he offered to the world could be misunderstood so easily. But what affected him more than the comment was the way Sandra had stood up for him with such certainty, strength, and respect. It reminded him of how she had once seen through him when no one else could. It reminded him of how her presence had helped him back then without her ever realizing it. Sandra stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. She told him she never wanted him to carry anything alone. She told him that she understood his silence not because he was unreadable, but because she knew he felt things in a deeper, quieter way. She told him that being calm was not a weakness and being private was not deception. It was a form of strength, a part of who he was. Keanu's eyes softened as he listened. There was a light in them now, one that did not come from the lanterns. Something inside him was slowly being freed. But the suspense was not over. He turned toward her fully, leaning back from the railing. He looked more steady now, more grounded. He said there was one more truth he had avoided telling her, one that had been inside him longer than the notebook itself. Sandra's expression shifted with curiosity. Her heart slowed, or maybe it grew louder, she could not tell. He said that the page about her was not just about gratitude. It was about something deeper, something he had never told anyone, not even the people closest to him. He paused for a moment, gathering courage. Sandra did not move. She only watched him with patience, prepared for whatever truth was coming. Keanu finally said that during the time he wrote that page, she was the only person he trusted fully, that her presence made him feel safe when nothing else did, that he saw her not just as a colleague or friend, but as someone who pulled him back into himself in ways he could not understand then. He said there were days when he kept moving only because he remembered the kindness she had shown him, and that even now, years later, she remained the only person who could ground him with a single sentence. Sandra's breath caught slightly. The weight of his honesty reached her in a way she had not expected. She always knew they shared an understanding, but she never imagined the depth of it. She placed her hand on the wooden railing, close to his but not touching. She told him gently that she was honored he trusted her that deeply. She added that she always felt something different in their bond, too, something that lived in silence but carried truth. The wind grew stronger for a moment, brushing through the trees, almost like nature itself wanted to acknowledge the moment. But before Sandra could speak further, Keanu said there was one final page in the notebook he had not shown yet. One that held the true reason he needed privacy for the meeting earlier. One that explained why he hesitated for years to share the truth. Sandra felt a wave of suspense rise inside her. Because if the first page already carried so much weight, then what could the final page contain? Keanu reached for the notebook again, holding it close. And Sandra knew. The real reveal was still ahead. And it was going to change everything. The deck grew quieter as the night deepened. The lanterns flickered gently, giving the scene a warm glow that contrasted the cold mountain air. Sandra watched Keanu with steady focus as he held the notebook against his chest. His fingers pressed firmly around it, as if he needed to gather strength from something familiar. Sandra understood that whatever was written inside the final page was not just emotional but deeply personal. Something he had carried for so long that letting it out now felt like lifting a weight he had almost grown used to. She stepped a little closer so she could see his face better. He was calm, but his eyes held a depth that only appeared during the rarest moments, moments when he allowed himself to be fully honest. The sky above them was clear, and the stars felt like quiet witnesses. Keanu finally opened the notebook again. He flipped through the pages slowly, the paper making a soft sound that filled the silence between them. Sandra could see that the pages were filled with small notes, sketches, and lines of reflection. Some pages were newer, some turned yellow with time, but he moved past all of them until he reached the very last page. He hesitated. Sandra felt her breath pause naturally, not from tension, but from the sense that this was a turning point in their journey. Whatever he was about to reveal was tied to everything that had happened today, every emotion he tried to hide, every moment he had swallowed silently. He held the notebook open but did not turn it toward her yet. Instead, he spoke first. He said that the last page was something he wrote during a period when he thought he had reached the edge of his emotional endurance. It was a time even darker than the one he had described earlier. He said he had never shown it to anyone because he feared people might misunderstand it. He feared someone might think he was weak or unsure of himself. But he said that today, in the way Sandra stood for him with complete certainty and calm respect, something changed inside him. Something clicked, something unlocked. He realized he did not want to carry the page alone anymore. He wanted someone to understand the truth he had kept hidden. Sandra listened with a stillness that was full of compassion. She did not urge him to continue. She only watched him with a presence that grounded him. He turned the notebook toward her. The final page was simple, but the words were heavy. They were written in the same quiet handwriting, but the letters carried an emotion that felt deeper than the rest of the notebook. The page was titled with a single line. Sandra read it slowly. "The person who saved my light." Right beneath the title, written with clarity and careful thought, was her name. Sandra felt her heartbeat shift, her breath slowing as she read the next lines. Keanu had written that during that darkest period, he feared he was losing the part of himself that believed in goodness. He feared that the world was becoming too heavy, too loud, too cruel. He felt like his own spirit was fading, like he was becoming a shadow of who he used to be. But then he wrote something that made Sandra's eyes soften with deep emotion. He wrote that she had unknowingly brought back a sense of peace in him, that her presence had reminded him that kindness still existed, that her understanding helped him realign with himself when he felt lost. She had not done anything dramatic. She had not tried to rescue him. She had simply seen him, truly seen him, and for a person like him, that kind of understanding was a form of rescue. He wrote that she became the anchor he did not know he needed, the reminder that even quiet people could be understood without having to shout, defend, or explain. And the final line on the page was the one that hit the deepest. "Your kindness kept me from losing my way." Sandra read it twice, her hands slowly lowering as she processed every word. It was not a romantic confession. It was something more rare, more intimate. It was truth in its purest form, a truth that came from gratitude, respect, and emotional honesty. Keanu watched her closely, unsure of how she would react. He had never exposed this level of vulnerability to anyone before. He looked steady on the outside, but she could sense the slight tremor inside him, the fear that she might pull away or misunderstand the depth of his words. She did not. Sandra stepped closer, close enough for their shadows to merge in the lantern light. She placed her hand gently over the notebook, not taking it from him but holding it with him. She told him in a soft, clear voice that she had never imagined he carried such heavy emotions alone. She told him that she had always felt a connection between them, something unspoken but real. She told him that she never wanted him to feel like his silence made him hard to understand. Keanu's expression shifted slowly. The tension in his shoulders softened. His eyes held a warmth that grew stronger with every word she spoke. She continued, telling him that he never needed to hide his depth, that people like him were rare because they carried their emotions with quiet strength instead of loud reactions. She said his calmness had never been something she questioned. She always admired it because it was honest, not forced. Keanu looked down for a moment, his breath forming a faint cloud in the cold air. Then he said something that changed the air around them completely. He said he had feared sharing the last page because it made him feel too exposed. But after she defended him earlier with such unwavering certainty, he realized he could trust her with the truth he had never shown anyone. Sandra felt a rise of warmth in her chest. She reached out and lightly touched his arm, a reassuring gesture she rarely used but felt right in this moment. She told him he was not alone, not now, not ever again. And something inside Keanu finally loosened, like a knot that had been tied for years. But the night was not finished yet. Keanu glanced toward the main building of the retreat. He said there was one more thing he needed to do before the night ended, something that connected to the notebook, to Thomas, and to the moment Sandra had defended him. Sandra tilted her head slightly, curiosity rising again. Keanu closed the notebook gently, holding it in both hands. He said that the real reason he wanted privacy during the earlier meeting was not just to reveal his past. It was because there was a second reveal waiting, something that involved more than him, something that would change the way the entire retreat group saw him. And even Sandra was not ready for what he would reveal next. The night settled deeper over the retreat center, and the lanterns along the pathway flickered like soft stars. Sandra and Keanu walked slowly toward the main building after closing the notebook. Keanu held it carefully in his hand, almost like it carried a living heartbeat. The forest around them was quiet, the air cool, the moment heavy with anticipation. Sandra felt it in her chest. Something important was coming, something he had not said yet. They reached the wooden entrance of the meeting hall. Inside, a few warm lamps glowed softly. The facilitator was already there, waiting. He had sensed earlier that Keanu was holding more than he revealed. Thomas stood near the corner, unsure, uncomfortable, clearly still processing the emotional weight of everything that had happened. When Keanu and Sandra entered, the room naturally shifted into stillness again. Something about his presence made everyone pause. Something about Sandra's calm support made the atmosphere even more grounded. Keanu took a slow breath and stepped toward the center of the room. Sandra stayed by his side, not too close, not too far, but exactly where he needed her to be. The facilitator asked if he was ready to continue. Keanu nodded. His voice was gentle but steady as he explained that the notebook was only one part of why he needed a private conversation earlier. He said that the misunderstanding with Thomas had touched an old wound, but it had also opened another truth he had been carrying silently. He paused for a moment, allowing the room to settle. Then he said something that made Sandra's breath still. He said that despite everything he had shared tonight, the deeper reason he reacted so strongly to Thomas's accusation was not because it hurt him personally. It was because he knew someone else in the group had been going through the same struggle silently. Someone who feared being misunderstood. Someone who felt judged for their nature, their calmness, their quiet way of existing. The room shifted with curiosity. Thomas looked around, confused. Sandra watched Keanu with full focus, understanding something unspoken. Keanu then turned toward the facilitator and said quietly that he had noticed something throughout the retreat. He said he had seen signs in the way one of the participants sat during discussions, the way they hesitated when speaking, the way they looked down when others talked too loudly. He said he recognized those signs because he had lived through them before. And then he revealed the truth. He said that one of the participants, a young woman named Alina, had been carrying a silent fear inside her throughout the retreat. She feared speaking up, feared being judged, feared that her quiet nature made her weaker or less valuable. She had looked up to others for strength, but never to herself. She had withdrawn deeper each day. Sandra remembered Alina. She had seen her sitting quietly during sessions, speaking only a few gentle words. No one had realized she was struggling. But Keanu had noticed. He explained that the moment Thomas criticized him earlier, he saw Alina shrink in her seat. She looked terrified, not for him, but because she believed she would be judged in the same way. It reminded him of his own past. It reminded him of how painful it is when someone attacks the part of you that feels the most natural. And that was why he needed privacy. He told them that he wanted to defend Alina, but he did not want to do it publicly. He did not want to expose her vulnerability without her consent. Instead, he had spoken to her privately after the session. He had listened to her fears. He had encouraged her, telling her that quietness was not weakness and sensitivity was not fragility. He told her that silence could still hold strength and that she deserved to feel understood. The facilitator's eyes softened. Thomas's expression shifted into shame and realization. Sandra felt a warm ache in her heart because she saw something deeper now. She saw that Keanu had not only carried his own wounds, but had also used them to protect someone else. Keanu continued. He said that Alina had written him a small note after their talk, thanking him for making her feel seen for the first time in a long time. He explained that her note was the reason he gathered the courage to share his own truth later. He realized he could not ask someone to be honest and brave while he stayed silent about his own struggles. Sandra felt a deep respect rise within her, stronger than before. Keanu stepped forward and placed the notebook gently on the table between them. He said he brought it because he wanted the room to understand something important. He wanted them to know that everyone carries something unseen. Everyone has quiet battles. Everyone holds fears, memories, doubts, and hopes that they do not always share. He said that when Sandra defended him earlier, it did not only save him from a painful moment, it gave him the strength to protect someone else too. Sandra felt her chest tighten with emotion. She had never expected the ripple effect of her action to go this far. She watched him closely, sensing how much effort it took for him to open his heart this deeply. The facilitator looked at Thomas and asked if he understood the weight of the moment now. Thomas nodded slowly, eyes low, voice soft, as he apologized not just to Keanu, but to Alina too. He said he had spoken without thinking, without understanding, without considering that his words might hurt more than one person. Keanu accepted the apology calmly. Sandra did too. The facilitator thanked Keanu for his honesty, saying that he had not only healed himself tonight, but had helped the entire group grow. The room felt lighter afterward, as if a knot of misunderstanding finally loosened. After the meeting ended, the hall emptied, leaving only Sandra and Keanu inside. They stood together in the soft glow of the lamps. Sandra looked at him with a warm smile, the kind of smile that carried trust and deep admiration. She told him quietly that what he did tonight was not just brave. It was beautiful. She said that people often think strength is loud, but real strength is gentle, quiet, and rooted in compassion. Keanu looked at her, eyes soft, voice calm. He said he had only been able to do it because of her. She had stepped in when he needed someone. She had protected him when he could not protect himself. She had shown him that he did not have to carry everything alone anymore. Sandra placed her hand lightly on his arm. She told him he never had to carry anything alone again. They stepped outside into the cool night air, walking slowly under the stars. No words were needed now. The silence between them was peaceful, full of mutual respect and understanding. It was the kind of silence that spoke more than any conversation ever could. The retreat center slept quietly, unaware of the emotional transformation that had taken place inside its walls. And as they walked back toward their cabins, Keanu held the notebook softly at his side. But for the first time in years, it felt lighter, because he was finally not carrying it alone.